Hello and welcome to today's video. My name is Jeannie and today we're going to be talking about the invitation. Boy, do I have a lot to say about the invitation. Like, I have so much to say, I feel like my mouth can't quite keep up. But I've actually tried to film this, or have filmed this like 3 different times, but I found I was in a little bit of a reactive state. So I'm like, okay, let me try a 3rd time and see if this time's the charm. But I really wanted to make this video because there's a lot of information out there, and it's not just the information that's out there. It's like, how are we taking in the information? How are we interpreting the information? Many times it's not so much the information, it's again how we take it in, and we can start forming certain beliefs that are not going to serve us in the long run. And if we're kind of like doing this on our own, we don't really have someone to bounce questions off of, or if we're just making assumptions and taking things in and not really thinking to ask questions, which is something that I did through like my entire life, we can end up forming, again, like I said, beliefs that aren't necessarily going to serve us in the long run. So that's kind of like one of the main reasons I wanted to create this video. I do have my definitive book of human design that I'm going to read about like 2.5 pages of it. If you've already read this section, I would still encourage you to listen in, because one of the feedback comments that I get a lot with the people that I work with is they'll say, you know what, I've heard this before, people have said this to me before, or I've read it before, but I didn't quite feel it, it didn't quite click as well as when you just said it. Like, I heard you say it and like, I got it. So I get a comment very frequently about something about the sound of my voice, something about the way I say things that helps people really integrate the information. So I want to invite you just to listen in anyways, and then I think towards the end I'm going to go on a little bit of a rant as to how I personally use and see the invitation, which, if you've been here for a while, you already know I kind of like do things differently. But let's also get this intro piece out of the way. If you watch my other videos, you kind of probably already know what I'm going to say. A little bit about me from a human design perspective. I am a 6'2", so I am a 6'2", self-projected projector. I have a defined head, ajna, throat, G-center, and they're all defined or connected straight down the middle channels, which are all part of individual circuitry. So not only am I someone who is designed to speak their mind, I'm also here to do things differently. If you like a more traditional approach to human design, well, I always say this, probably you're not going to agree with a lot of the things I say. I'd still invite you to listen. I don't know, I do personally like taking a look at different perspectives. So with that taken care of, let's get started. Okay, so I'm going to start reading on page 132. We're going to do 132, 133, and a little part of 134. And I'm probably going to pause a little bit in between as I read to give y'all a little bit of my thought process and some notes on like how to form beliefs that are going to serve us as projectors. So let's get started. Okay, under the heading, All Projectors. The dilemma for all projectors is waiting for the invitation. They want to be and must be recognized and invited in order to fulfill their purpose as administrators and guides. Personal success for projectors is dependent on having energetically healthy people around them who acknowledge their projector skills and offer them their energy resources to work with. Okay, so essentially this first paragraph is teaching us that in order for us to fulfill our purpose as projectors, which is to guide and kind of like have administrative roles, we must be recognized and invited. Okay, And it's because of how our energetic field, our aura works, okay? It's the mechanics of it. So we're going to go into a little bit more detail later as like why this is especially important for us. But one of the things I want y'all to really start focusing on and start creating awareness around is like, here it says that our success is dependent on having energetically healthy people around us. So there might be some, okay, how do I want to say this? Start creating awareness around like who in your life doesn't feel healthy for you, because this is really going to impact the degree of success and how much we can do, not only physically, but mentally, emotionally, spiritually, because our energetic field, or like as projectors, we are quite sensitive to the energy around us. This is why it's so important to have like really high standards of, not only the people, but the environment, the foods that we bring into our energetic field and into our bodies. So let's continue. It says, when not self-projectors, eager for recognition of any kind, try to meet the expectations of others and thus are recognized instead of for who they are not, they can get confused and attach themselves to anyone, even someone who is detrimental to them. Healthy projectors are those who avoid this trap by recognizing themselves and understanding their own limitations. When they are no longer dependent on external sources for affirmation of any kind, the true projector gift of recognition is returned to its rightful and properly functioning place in their strategy. So one of the things that I think all projectors can really relate to, especially like before we knew we were projectors, we really understand that energy of eagerness and neediness. There's this kind of like need or desire to like really be seen, really be recognized, and like I see this play out in children a lot. I can kind of like look back at my childhood and see how this is played out with people that I felt like I would get some recognition for, like forget it, like people pleasing, eagerness, to like the full max. So here's where we want to be careful, because just because we're receiving recognition, like there's a difference between receiving recognition for who we're not and receiving recognition for who we are. So it can create some confusion, and it's about learning to tap in again to who feels healthy and setting higher standards, and also like not creating beliefs around like, oh well, nobody is ever going to want to work with me, or waiting for the invitation is going to take a long time, or like, okay, I kind of wanted to mention this in the beginning and I forgot, but waiting for the invitation from this point forward, I would invite you to look at it as a very good thing, because in my mind for a very long time, like waiting for an invitation felt like a bad thing. It felt like I was just going to be waiting all the time. I wasn't going to get to do a lot of things that I wanted to do. So can we from this point forward learn to see the invitation as a form of protection? It's a form of protection. It's a form of conserving our energy, because our energy is finite. It's limited compared to generators and gens, right? Which is like the majority of the population. So this is why we want to be extra careful and wait for the invitation. There are certain caveats and exceptions to the rule from my perspective. We're going to talk about that later. Right now I'm going to do my best to stick to source material. But yeah, we want to also do work around releasing that eagerness energy, that needy energy, that clingy, graspy energy, because it's not going to bring us recognition. Actually, what ends up happening, and if you can recall back, you could probably relate to this a lot, we're actually going to end up repelling people, because even if they don't really understand what's going on, they're going to feel it. Our aura is penetrating, right? At an unconscious level, many times people are going to feel it, and they're not going to feel that desire to to want to be around us. So this can lead us to experiencing bitterness and rejection, and again forming beliefs around like, people don't want to hang out with me, you know, there's something wrong with me. And there's nothing wrong with us, we just haven't quite learned how to manage and work with our energetic field. Okay, so one of the things it mentions here is to avoid this trap of like attaching to people that are detrimental to us, is recognizing ourselves first. This deals with doing work around self-worth, recognizing ourselves, acknowledging ourselves. What do we do well? And sometimes, many times, like for me personally, I come from a very religious background, and one of the things that I felt like I took in not the best way possible was not thinking too highly of myself, you know, this concept of humility. But I took it to the extreme where like I wasn't recognizing myself at all. So here, kind of like the key word to keep in mind as we're going through this is avoiding extremes and finding balance. And balance is going to look different for everyone, okay? I tend to think of things in terms of a sliding scale where like there's one end here and then there's another end here, and those ends are opposing opposites, duality. And then I kind of like visualize, where on the scale am I, and where do I want to move, where do I want to be, where does it feel good. And I never picture like the scale fixed. I can always work my way up or down depending on what the situation calls for. Another thing that I want to really emphasize here is that when we're no longer dependent on external sources for affirmation of any kind, that's when like the recognition just naturally comes. It's kind of like a paradox. It's like the more we look for the recognition, the less we're going to find it, the less we're going to receive it. So it's about doing the work also around standing in our power, knowing and feeling that we're powerful human beings, we're powerful projectors. We just didn't know how to stand in our power and how to use our power in a way that was going to benefit us. So again, it's not being dependent, and I find like as a projector I definitely developed a lot of codependent tendencies, especially with my mom, because she is the person that understood me the most. I felt really seen by her. So I think as projectors it could be very easy for us to develop codependent tendencies. Just some things to keep in mind that, you know, you could just again start creating awareness around, and not that you have to tackle everything at once. Again, the more awareness we create around things, I find like it helps. And also it's not so much about, it's like for me it feels 80% awareness, 20% inspired action. But let's keep going. The most basic but essential function of recognition for projectors relates to choosing people to be in their inner circle. People who will keep them aligned with your own path and purpose. Because projectors are designed to penetrate other centers so deeply, and because they cannot fulfill their purpose without access to the energy and resources of other people, projectors need to know who is right for them, who recognizes or sees them for who they truly are. This applies to the ways they connect to the wider community as well. For example, if you are a skilled classical guitarist, you wouldn't book a concert to entertain a crowd expecting to dance to rock and roll, unless your personal gifts include converting the casual listener to classical guitar music, and you've been invited to do just that. Without the invitation, you would be wasting your precious projector gifts and leave the place without recognition and buried by the experience. No amount of money could buy or replace what you would lose. Okay, so here it talks about having an inner circle. And again, I would invite you to look at your inner circle at the present moment and ask yourself, are these people who help me stay aligned with my own purpose and path? This is something that I've had to start considering to open up to, because I realized that my inner circle for me was my family, mom, dad, brother. This I created this very intentionally because, again, having a lot of trauma around social interactions with people, feeling a lot of rejection, feeling like I didn't fit in, lots of individual circuitry themes, I started creating boundaries that were so firm that nobody could get in. So when my mom passed away, and then earlier this year my dad passed away, I realized, oh, I don't have an inner circle anymore. So for me, it's been a process of letting people in. But I would invite you to take a look at, like, who's in your inner circle, and do you really feel seen and recognized by them? Doesn't necessarily mean, like, if you're not feeling recognized by them, doesn't necessarily mean you have to let them go. You can have a conversation, and things could change. Many times, sometimes, we do need to let go of certain people, and by letting them go and setting higher standards into the kind of people that we, like, our inner circle, the quality of our inner circle, we're able to call in a higher frequency fractal. This gets us moving along our journey of, like, our purpose in life. Okay, so let's keep reading. Nothing boosts the mood of projectors like being recognized, or drops them faster into a state of bitterness when they are not. When projectors try to get others to see them, they are perceived as needy and demanding. Other types feel this need for recognition and resist it. By initiating and inviting themselves, projectors are giving their inherent power to the other person, which places them at a huge disadvantage. This often happens in family relationships where they have not been seen as themselves from the beginning. Taking their power back is difficult at first. It involves shifting their focus, standing securely grounded in the awareness of their own gifts, and waiting until their own auric message is clearly received. This allows the people around them to recognize and invite them for their real gifts into the relationship, and changes the basis for the relationship as a whole. Okay, a few little things here that I would tweak. I think as projectors, we can also really tap in and feel like how we feel when we are really recognized. Like, it feels really good. And when we're not, we can definitely drop into a state of bitterness. And here it mentions something that we had already talked about. When we're trying too hard, we can come off as needy or desperate, and that actually ends up repelling people. And another concept that mentions here is resistance. When we are in a relationship or in a situation where we are feeling a lot of resistance, this is where I would invite you to pause and take inventory and say, okay, hold up, why am I feeling resistance? Invitation. Probably because, it could be more formal invitations required. It could be your underlying energy that people are perceiving it, and it's causing them to kind of like close off. And you can tweak that. You can tweak that very quickly to where the situation can shift very quickly into a more favorable outcome. I don't agree here where it says that when it says that taking their power can be difficult in the beginning. I don't necessarily agree that has to be the case. Like, don't let that start forming ideas in your head that it has to be difficult, or that it's going to be more difficult than it needs to be. There is this feeling of not feeling, but there's a learning experience that happens for us as projectors when we really learn to step into our power, because many times, because we are projectors and we don't know how to use our energy in the best way possible. Again, we're operating in ways that aren't serving us and that aren't serving others, right? So this creates a lot of bitterness, and we give away our power to people, right? Because I remember in the beginning where it says when we stop needing external sources for affirmation. I find that as projectors, that's something that a lot of us do, where we're looking for that external validation, that external affirmation in order to feel worthy. But we're already worthy, and also in order to feel powerful, but we already are powerful. So it's a question about just recognizing a pattern, stop giving our power away, and we stand in our power. And when we stand in our power, for me, what it feels like, it's a very grounded energy. It's not pushy, it's not controlling, it's not authoritarian. It's very grounded, very peaceful, very like, I get like royal, majestic vibes. That's kind of like what power feels to me. And if you've kind of like grown up in a family dynamic where, you know, maybe like one person held all the power and kind of like set the mood for the entire family, your relationship with power might need a little bit of a reframing it, right? Power can sometimes have a negative connotation. We can think of like abusive power. We can think of like using that power to take from others. We can think of using that power to use it for like greedy purposes, and that's not what power has to mean. Again, think of like which scale or which side of the sliding scale am I with regards to power. And you can learn to like gradually build up, you know, because sometimes for many of us this is a new concept. It is going to take a little bit of time to like get a feel for like how to properly or step into our power in a way that's going to serve us. Okay, let's keep going. Now we're going to read the part about projector strategy, recognition, to wait for the invitation. Projectors are designed to be seen. They are always being noticed, but one must question what is really getting the attention. Are they being recognized for their gifts or not? When projectors are truly recognized, they feel it in their core and there is no doubt. The projector's strategy and decision-making process is to wait for the recognition and then the invitation. Recognition and invitations come from silence. When projectors grasp that waiting quietly is a quality of readiness, they can watch their strong aura pull people and recognition to them. Once they have been recognized and invited correctly, their gifts and skills are empowered as they are filled up by a transient energy that is theirs to choreograph. The energy they connect with and commit to managing sort of flows through them. It's not theirs, but they get to utilize its potential to benefit others for as long as that invitation lasts. Okay, so one of the things or one of the beliefs that I know I formed as a projector is that like feeling invisible, feeling like nobody really saw me. But in reality, like projectors are here to be seen, okay? So I've had to do work again around healing my relationship with people, healing it feeling safe to be around people, and also it feeling safe to be seen. So when we really learn to understand like the mechanics of what it means to be a projector, we can really, again, step into our power with more understanding, more information, and things can really, like our experience can shift very quickly, okay? Here, what it says is that when we're really recognized, when we're truly recognized, we're going to feel it in our core. And I want to say that depending on what your authority is, that's kind of like where you're going to feel it in your body. I tend to feel it here. I'm self-projected, so my G center, that's kind of like where I feel it. If you've got emotional, splenic, or ego authority, I want to say you might feel it more towards your gut. But you know, you tune into your body and see where you feel it. Another thing that it mentions here is that the recognition comes before the invitation. So let's say you receive an invitation, ask yourself, wait, do I really feel recognized by this person? And take that into consideration when you are using your authority to decide whether or not to accept that invitation. Another quality of recognition and invitation says that it comes from silence, our silence. Again, another visual I get like is a child who is a projector and doesn't know it's feeling rejected, it's not feeling invited, it's very bitter. It's kind of like me, pick me, I'm right here, pick me, that type of vibe. But that's not where our invitations are going to come from. That kind of energy is actually going to repel them. So there's this quality of silence, okay? And here, again, I would invite you to start looking at silence as a good thing. Because what the silence does is it allows our energy to speak for us. And this is where I would practice like standing in your power, feeling really grounded, feeling very confident in what your contribution is and what your gifts are. And it feels to me like I know what I'm really good at. I don't need anyone to tell me or to like, confirm what I'm good at. Doesn't mean that they don't do it, but I'm just saying like I know what I'm good at. And many times for people this can come off as like, oh my gosh, like she's so, sure of herself or things like that. Again, like these concepts of humility comes in where it's like not a good thing to really like own what you're good at. But again, if your underlying intention is to be of service, like it's a good thing to know what you're good at. You know what you can contribute, right? So the silence, we're talking about silence. So when we're able to like stand in silence, know what we're good at, recognize ourselves for our gifts, what our aura, what our energetic field is going to do is it's going to draw in, it's going to pull in the invitations, the recognition, then the invitations, okay? So silence is a good thing. We're not really going to need to speak. The silence, or us standing in our power, is going to do the talking for us. Like the thing that comes to mind is like when I'm talking to my brother, sometimes like I have the tendency of asking him one question and then my mind can go like a mile a minute, so I ask him another question and then another question without really giving him an opportunity to answer. And sometimes he's like, hey, could you like be quiet so that I could answer? So that's kind of like the thing that came to mind when I was reading this, like the seeing silence as a good thing, seeing silence as the thing that's going to help pull in the recognition and the invitations, okay? And for me, silence feels like very peaceful, very powerful. It feels majestic. It feels elegant. It feels like quite grounded. And there's like this quality of it feeling sacred. So tune in to like what does silence feel for you, and like I invite you to sit in those feelings for a little while, so that you know, like when you're in a situation where you're like, oh, I'd be really good at that, again, remember the silence and remember how that silence is going to pull the thing that you're desiring to participate in come to you. Okay, so once we've received the invitation, we're gonna like use our authority to decide whether or not we want to accept the invitation. If it feels like it's a correct invitation for us, what happens is that our gifts and this is what the book says. Okay, I'm gonna read it because I really like how it words it. It says, our gifts and skills are empowered as they are filled up by a transient energy that is ours to choreograph. And that's kind of like what it really feels like. It feels like here it says like we manage the energy. It flows through us. We don't hold on to it. It's not ours, but it literally feels like we choreograph it. And I like feel, what that would feel like using my hands. And this is what the invitation allows us to do. It gives us like, it gets rid of the resistance because people are like, yes, I recognize you for your gifts, and it's like that opens the doors to using their energy, resources in whatever way we see fit. Okay, that's what the invitation does. And we're able to do that for as long as the invitation lasts. So let's say that you accept an invitation and everything's flowing smoothly, like you can feel yourself choreograph the energy, everything's kind of like clicking into place, but all of a sudden you start feeling resistance. check in to see if the invitation has been revoked. Doesn't mean that things necessarily have to come to an end, but again, there might be like some conversations that need to occur, or many times like the invitation has come to an end, and that's okay too. It's better to like accept that and then like move on, because otherwise we're gonna get really tired because we're encountering resistance, and we're not going to be able to choreograph and use the energy and move it and flow it in the way that we are great at. Okay, kind of like the image that came to mind when I was reading this is that there's this series on, I want to say Netflix. It's produced by BBC, and it's one of those Sherlock Holmes types of stories. I want to say it's called Sherlock. I haven't watched it in a while. I don't have Netflix right now, but it's the role of Sherlock is played by the guy that plays Doctor Strange, Benedict something. Him. He does such a good job. But there are these scenes where they're kind of like really helping us like visualize his internal thought process, and it just like all these things pop up, pieces of information, and he like uses his hands to swipe. He brings things down. He brings things up. He like just swooshes things to one side. He pins things here, other things here, and you can just see him do this. Like obviously he's doing it at a mental level, but many times that's what it feels like. I'm like, yes, I understand what that feels like. It just feels like this this way of moving energy that feels really, really good as a projector. Another thing that comes to mind is kind of like an orchestra director, where he's just waving a little, what's it called, like a baton or a little wand thingy, and he's just directing, how people are playing their instrument just by, I have no idea like what any of those movements mean, but I'm like, that's kind of like what it feels like. Oh my gosh, I can't with myself sometimes. Okay. So like learn to tap into those feelings, and if you've never had an invitation where it's felt like that, set an intention, ask for guidance. I would really like to know what it feels like to receive an invitation that I feel recognized, I am recognized for my gifts, and I'd like to know what it's like to receive an invitation that's in alignment for me. Show me what that's like, God, and then see what happens. You don't be surprised like if something happens really quickly. It's one of my favorite things to ask sometimes when I'm like, oh, I haven't had an invitation, like I'm open to an invitation. People say, I don't know if they say that or if this is just what I feel like they imply sometimes, that invitations can take a really long time. I'm like, I beg to differ. I manifest my invitations all the time. But again, like I tend to be a little bit of a rebel, but we can talk about that when we're towards the end. Okay. Let's keep going. It says, waiting for the invitation has specific qualities to it that are subtly different from the waiting strategy of generators who wait for their life to be directed from moment to moment through response. Projectors are waiting for what is best described as a more formal, long-term invitation. They are waiting for investors to recognize, request, and empower their special skills in exchange for ample compensation. The invitation offers the projector access to the investors initiating and generating energy resources. This is what the projector lives for, how their genius is empowered, how they will experience the success they are here to achieve in their lifetime. The relationship between generator and projector is both essential and interdependent, as neither has the power to fulfill their purpose without the other. Investor invitations generally, but not exclusively, apply to the four major decisions one makes in life: the invitation to love, to a career, to bond with others, and to a place to live. Once an invitation is received and accepted, projectors can use all the skills at their disposal within the parameters set by the invitation for as long as the investor remains open and receptive and willing to play their part. This can be for weeks, a few months, a few years, or for the rest of their life. When entering into any of these major long-term commitments, projectors need to be intentional and deliberate in following their strategy and authority. So, kind of like the main takeaway from here is like there are four major aspects where the invitation really, really comes into play. invitation to love, invitation to a career, to bond with others or interact with others, and a place to live, where you're going to live. Those are the 4 ones where I would, like, even I'm like, okay, I'm going to look for a more formal invitation here, because again, there are longer commitment, longer in term and forms of commitment, okay? So if we go into one of these long-term commitment situations and we don't enter this situation correctly, we're going to experience bitterness, okay? So 4 major areas, okay? Mentally go over those 4 major areas where a more formal invitation is required. And I don't want to say like required in the sense of like mandatory. I like to use the term like it's more ideal. Things will flow better in that sense. I do have like a few, but that I'll mention more towards the end. Okay. And again, here it also mentions that the invitation is going to give us access to resources, and we're going to do that as long as like the investor is willing to play their part. Again, learning to feel into when the invitation has been tweaked, it's been changed, like it's no longer like the original terms we agreed to, or the other person is like no longer in it energetically. We're going to feel it. I don't want to say as projectors, we're going to feel it, okay? Let's keep going. The next essential step for projectors is being selective. Just because they finally received an invitation doesn't automatically make it right for them. Their authority will guide them to the right energy exchange for them. Each projector's decision-making process is unique, and the best way to determine what a correct invitation looks like is to measure the level of resistance they meet when they act on one. Over time, and with increased self-awareness, the projector's proficiency at recognizing correct invitations improves, and the process itself is refined. When projectors are recognized and invited, they suddenly have access to the reliable energy of others, which in turn releases their own projector gifts and our outer authority. Patience and careful observation are once again key factors. Okay, so here, again, just because we receive an invitation doesn't mean we have to accept it, okay? Just because we receive an invitation doesn't mean it's going to be a correct invitation for us. One of the ways, again, we've already mentioned this, but let's emphasize it again because it's really important. It's a very good indicator of whether or not you're really being recognized and whether or not there is the type of invitation we need in order to really step into our purpose and guide that energy. Resistance. How much resistance are you feeling, experiencing, facing, for example, at work, in your relationship, where you live, the people that you interact with? If there is resistance, pause and, with curiosity, take a look at where it's coming from, and then start asking for guidance as like what needs to be done, whether it's conversations, stepping away, moving, things like that, so that you can feel better. Because again, it's not only people that keeps us healthy, it's the environment as well. So just some things to keep in mind. Another thing it's said here is that, okay, our decision-making process is unique to us, okay? And it's going to take some time for us to fine-tune these skills because they're new to us, right? Like waiting for an invitation might be a new concept to us. So patience, but I also don't want you to think that patience is a bad thing. Again, let's reframe. Patience is a good thing. Patience is going to help me protect my energy. Patience is going to help keep me healthy. Patience is going to help draw the correct invitations, the correct recognition, the correct people to me. The decision-making process is a process that gets to be refined as we learn more. Okay, where we're at right now, we're operating from a certain level of awareness. As we start taking notes of like, oh, this happened when, you know, this, and this, and then I felt like this, and that. Okay, what did I learn from this? I don't think I want to do that again. I liked how I did this, so we're going to keep that. And you tweak your system. You know, you make changes to it. Yeah. So over time and with increased self-awareness, our proficiency at recognizing correct invitations improves and the process itself is refined. Sometimes, I want to say sometimes, like, we're going to need, I don't like the word need, but to accept the wrong invitations. And not that we do this intentionally, you know, because again, we're learning. So sometimes I found myself like saying yes to an invitation and I felt drained afterwards. I'm like, oh yeah, when I look back, I realized there's something that was telling me no, but I went with it anyways. Don't be hard on yourself, okay? It's okay. Take it as a learning moment. And this is going to give you information, data, awareness that you're going to be able to use next time and feel into the situation a little bit better. So again, I find like as projectors, because like we're super big on efficiency, many times when we're learning these concepts, like we want to do them really right. So we tend to go to like extremes. So I would invite you to be a little bit more playful, a little bit more light-handed, a light touch approach to these concepts, because then we go to extremes and that's also not healthy, okay? Observation is another one that I find is really, really helpful as a projector. Okay, we're almost done with the information that I get to talk about. How I see things. Okay. All invitations come with an expiration date. If the invitation has lost its energy or excitement, it is possible that the invitation has been withdrawn, or perhaps the job is complete but no one has noticed. The projector may feel that things just aren't working anymore, such as money, interest, support, or adequate time are no longer available. At this point, it is helpful to discuss the situation with the investor in order to clarify the status of the invitation. Once aligned in their power, projectors can let their auras do the talking. Their silent waiting is the most effective way to elicit correct invitations from others. Gradually, the people and invitations that were not based on recognition will slowly fall away. If projectors trust in the silent magic of their chemistry, there is no need to do the inviting themselves. Opportunities will come to them. When projectors understand the sanctity of their aura, they will nurture and protect it. This begins with creating an essentially aura-free space in their home they can retreat to in order to properly relax and release the auric energies they have absorbed during the day. Sleeping alone is also important for a projector because 70% of the population is generating sacral motor energy. In order to enter a deep, restful sleep, projectors must first take time to diffuse the extra energy they have taken in. Achieving a healthy balance between activity and rest in their life begins with learning to sense when enough is enough. When to let go of the residual auric energy of others, and when to be alone. Okay, there's a lot in here. When invitations come with an expiration date, the visual that comes to mind is like party invitations, like wedding invitations. You know, you get an invitation, you respond to the invitation, you reply, whether you're coming or you're going, you go to the party comes to an end, you know. So also, I tend to have issues letting go. I am learning to see letting go as a good thing, because before I used to make like letting go mean that nothing was going to come in. So I'm learning to reframe letting go again, seeing it as something good, seeing it as like, okay, this opportunity came to close. What's next? Like the next thing gets to be even better than this, you know. So again, reframing it. But this is really, really helpful. This paragraph, it brought a lot of like, oh, I get it now. Especially with like my business. You're gonna feel it. You're gonna feel it. When the invitation loses energy or it loses its excitement, again, approach it with curiosity, like what's going on here? Like I no longer feel the same level of excitement, or there's resistance. it's probably an indicator that it's time to either tweak things or let them go. Okay? Many times the invitation gets withdrawn, but nobody's saying anything, right? Or the job is complete, but again, nobody's saying anything because there could be a fear of letting go. Or also that maybe nobody's noticed. I find as projectors, you're gonna, well, I don't know, maybe you might not notice, because this is something that really, I'm like, oh, this applies to my work. Because at work, I felt like things just aren't working anymore. The money isn't coming in like it used to. The interest for me also isn't quite there. Those three things mainly. And I kind of had this nudge, like, it's time to let this go, because, like, in the long run, this isn't sustainable. But because I don't know, like, what to do next, I'm not quite sure, it's like I've been resisting letting it go. So let's create a lot of awareness. If we're encountering resistance, if we're feeling like the energy has been lost a little bit, there's not as much excitement as there was originally, let's pause and take a look whether the invitation has been withdrawn, the job has been complete, if it's time to let go, things like that. Okay, and again, it might not always mean that we have to let go, but maybe there are some changes that need to be made. Okay, and that could be like having a conversation. It could be like shifting our mindset. Like with me with work, I've really been working on shifting my mindset, because right now this is what pays the bills. I need to support myself. So I'm not the type that's just that like jumps in the deep end. Like that does not do good things for my nervous system. So I'm like, no, okay, let me reframe, let me shift the energy in here a little bit while I continue to figure out like what I want to do, like here around Instagram, with like some type of coaching or guide aspect that I really don't have in what I'm doing right now. So yeah, like right now for this, for me, it gives me a creative outlet and lets me express myself, something that I hadn't really been giving myself permission to do. Didn't have the space, didn't have the people to do this with, because like the main person I expressed myself with was my mom. When she passed away, I didn't have anybody else. Like, and it was really hard for me to bring in someone that I felt safe enough to be myself around. And there was also like a whole bunch of other inner work that I did that I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe, so many things that I didn't know. Anyways, that's a different subject for a different day. Okay. So yeah, if we're starting to notice signs, if we're starting to feel like just things aren't working, again, like if we have an investor, it's an opportunity to have a conversation with them. And I think this is quite funny, because like the way I started my business that I have right now, like I didn't really receive an invitation. I resell online, and one day I was out thrifting with my mom, and there was this jacket from a brand that I really love, but it was too big for me, and the jacket was like $4, and I could not leave it behind. So I just grabbed the jacket, and my mom was like already checking out. I'm like, we're taking this too. And she's like, but it doesn't fit you, it was too big. I'm like, yeah, I don't care. She's like, but you're not gonna be able to wear it. I'm like, yeah, I know, I'm gonna sell it. And she's like, you're gonna sell it? Like, where are you gonna sell it from? That's crazy. I'm like, or where are you gonna sell it on? I'm like, I'm gonna sell it on eBay. And she's like, eBay? Like, you've never sold on eBay. Like, it's crazy. I'm like, I don't know, I can't leave it. I'm gonna sell it on eBay. So I took the jacket and I listed it, and I want to say I listed it for $30, and it sold within like, I want to say maybe a day or two, definitely no more than a week. And I actually realized later that I could have gotten like at least $20 more for the jacket, because I found another one later on and I sold that one for $50. So when my mom started seeing that my idea was working, she actually became like my investor. So she would help me shop, and then we would flip whatever we would find, and that's how I made money. But like again, I had help. So I always feel like intuitively, even before I knew I was a projector, I knew that a traditional 9 to 5 was not going to work for me. I just knew it. And I was always very blessed to have a family that was very supportive of my energetic levels. I suffered through like a lot of chronic fatigue growing up, a lot of issues with blood sugar, blood pressure, and they never ever made me feel bad, feel guilty for not being able to do a lot physically, not being able to hold a 9-to-5 job. I was very protected. Now I realize I was overprotected, because now that, there's no mom, there's no dad, I've had to learn really quickly, like, to shift and to, like, get really creative as to how I'm going to support myself, because, that's a whole nother conversation that I can talk a lot about. But what I want to say by this is, like, I felt like that, this job that I feel like I created, I stumbled upon it very serendipitously. Serendipity. The concept of serendipity comes to mind whenever I think of, like, how in the world did I end up doing this? Like, because again, there was no invitation. So I always say that it was like divine intervention, like God looking out for me even before, like, I was very much aware of this compared to, like, how I am now. And I feel like, when I was reading this, I'm like, oh, God's been my investor this whole time, because again, I didn't necessarily receive an invitation from someone. I just got this idea and I went with it. And now I'm feeling like, okay, it's time to let this go. And I've been resisting it because of fear, because I don't know what's coming next. But I look back and I'm like, especially these past few weeks, this past 30 days, I've started to see how, like, I've just been taking aligned action and I've been creating momentum, and I'm like, I have no idea what's coming. I feel like something's coming. I don't know what it's going to look like, but, like, I'm trusting. I'm choosing to trust, and something really shifted when I really started believing in myself. I started to believe that I could do this. I don't remember what day it was, but I remember the feeling where I was in my room. I'm like, wait, I actually think that I can do this, because again, I made pretty good money considering for, like, how much I worked. I always told friends, like, I work like half part-time and I can easily bring in like $3,000 in a month. But again, like, I had a little bit of help. I had more, like, interactions with people. My mom, she got me out of the house. She was kind of like my bridge to the outer world, because one of the characteristics of having individual circuitry is that we lack social skills. And it doesn't mean that you can't learn them, but many times, like, I'm not saying, like, my mom did everything she could to try to help me. She really did. But there was information that, she didn't have. Like, if she had known this, she would have been able to help me a lot more. But yeah, okay, I forgot where I was going with that, so I'll wrap it up. Let's see if there's anything else, and then we'll get to the juicy stuff. Okay. I was standing in my power. That's what I was talking about. Yeah, I got to this point where I was like, I really think I can do this, because, like, dad, again, was a very huge financial help. Like, after mom passed away, I just really slipped into this huge depression, lost interest for life, and now recently, like, I've really felt myself wanting to, like, really wanting to engage with the world and with life again. And yeah, standing in our power, learning to tap into our power is so important as projectors. It's important for everyone, but I find it's particularly important for projectors because there can be a lot of conditioning, a lot of trauma, a lot of little bits and pieces big bits and pieces that once we learn to heal them, we can really step into that power and be seen and recognized and invited and be very well compensated. Which, if you're a projector, especially if you're one that has no motors, like, the struggle it is sometimes to, like, feel like you need to rest. And I use those moments to, like, really lean into trusting. And if it's a rest day, it's a rest day, and the money will still come regardless of whether I'm resting or not. So, again, different conversations, but okay, let's focus back in on the invitation, and then I'll wrap it up. So again, silent waiting, emphasis on silent waiting, making the silent waiting a good thing, not a bad thing. Because if we're waiting silently, but we're thinking the invitation's not going to come, they're not going to see me, I'm not going to get recognized, I'm not going to get well compensated, and we start forming these expectations around what we're going to experience expectations, whether they're good or bad, kind of become like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So can we learn to train our minds to, again, see the silent waiting as a good thing? Okay, it's a good thing. Think of it in terms of mechanics. It's going to draw the people in. It's going to draw the resources, the investors, so that we can be very well compensated. We're going to be recognized. It's going to feel really, really good. Everybody's going to win. And things like that. And just remember, like, if an invitation, you accepted one and you found it was a learning moment, if you could go back, it would have been a no. Just know that as we start stepping more into our power and learning to create awareness, those invitations are slowly going to fall away. Many times we won't really need to say anything. You can just like internally come to a place where like, yeah, this invitation, I feel like it needs to fall away. And you might have that person come and say, you know what, I feel like this job is complete. You close it off, everyone will go on their way, and a better invitation will come in. So start forming expectations. Like, I get invitations, they're perfect invitations, they're aligned invitations, there's recognition, there's recognition for my gifts. I am very well compensated for what I do. Yeah, okay. I really love this sentence, and I think I'll end this with this from the source material, and then we'll talk about what I want to talk about. It says, if projectors trust in the silent magic of their chemistry, there is no need to do the inviting themselves. Opportunities will come to them. So there's this silent magic of our chemistry, a silent magic quality to our energy field. And sometimes the way I envision my energetic field is like full of glitter, full of sparkles. So it's like it's invisible sparkles, but people feel them, you see them at an energetic level, and that draws attention, getting comfortable with the attention. So, okay, that's kind of like the bit that I wanted to read from the book. And now we are going to talk about a little bit more of like my personal experience with the invitation. There is this chart. Okay, I'm going to kind of, okay, it's a chart that looks like this, and it's called like the initiating cycle. A little bit blurry, but it shows you like how, or like who initiates in what situations. Okay, so when you're dealing with your same type, either of you can initiate. So manifestor either can initiate. Projector, reflector, Manny, Jen, either one can initiate among your same type. Now, when it comes to different types, that's where it could get a little bit tricky. Manifestors can initiate with reflectors, projectors, generators, and Manny-Gens. Generators can initiate with projectors and reflectors. Projectors can initiate with reflectors. Okay, this is what the chart says. And at first I thought, like, okay, let me share this because I feel like this is really good, but I kind of disagree with this a little bit. I feel like there's always some exceptions to the rule, and I really want to talk about this. If you're more a traditional approach to human design, you might disagree with me, and that's okay. Like, I don't necessarily want to, like, you don't have to tell me, that's okay. But I think it's important to learn to feel into situations, because the thing is, like, not everybody is going to walk around with their birth information or their human design chart stamped on their forehead or like printed on a t-shirt, as they're going, as they're out and about in the world. So how do I want to say this, because I have a lot I want to say. Let's talk about the concept. Because, like, let's say that you are a generator. There's a generator and there's a projector. Both of their strategies involve waiting, okay? But again, you're not always going to know what type you're dealing with. A lot of people, like, I know for fun, they, like, watch shows and they're like, oh, this person is this, and they have these channels and this. But I think it's a little bit unfair and not always wise to do that, because I feel like it's stereotyping with human design. And for example, with my mom, like she was a projector, and I never would have thought she was a projector. That woman had a lot of energy. I felt like she was more like manifestor vibes, because she could really trigger people, propel people. So I don't think it's always possible to accurately say this person is this type. Because then when I look at Gene Keys, I can see a lot of like, yeah, but human design says this, yeah, but. And in my experience, like when I've studied my chart, there are aspects that I don't necessarily agree with. And I want to encourage you to trust yourself. Like if you're not really feeling that something resonates with human design, that's okay. Okay? Learn to trust yourself. Like, it's okay. So let's say we have a generator and a projector. They're both waiting to respond. Well, they're both waiting. One's waiting to respond, one's waiting for the invitation. And let's say they both know that one operates as a generator, one operates as a projector. But they don't quite understand, when to initiate, when it's okay to initiate. So if they don't quite understand, there's going to be a lot of waiting, and there could be a lot of opportunities missed. So as a projector, even though here it says that many gens and gens initiate with projectors, I personally have found myself initiating in a lot of situations, and even though they said it's not ideal for projectors, I feel like I don't find that's the case for me. I find I tend to get really good results when I initiate. Not all the time. There are certain times where I'm like, okay, that didn't go quite as planned, but there was resistance. Invitation. Okay, that's when I bring in the invitation. Now, I say this because, like, let's say as a projector, it's about learning how to initiate. One of the best tools that we can learn as projectors is the use of questions and the use of the right question. So let's say I'm getting a feeling here where I'm getting the nudge to initiate, okay? In that case, I would initiate through the use of a question. I could start asking the person, hey, how are you? Give them an opportunity to answer. If I find that they're not really engaging, I'll back off and say, okay, there's resistance here, more formal invitation is required. I won't press on. Now, I want to here also introduce the concept of inspired action, okay? Personally, when I realized how much time, energy, and resources it saved when I started asking for guidance before I ever did anything. This is what I do for everything and anything, because again, it saves time, energy, and resources. There's the aspect of asking for guidance and then following that up with inspired action. It feels like following the breadcrumbs and taking one step at a time, your next right step, what feels like the next right step, over and over and over again until you get to your manifestation, until you get to your goal. Now, I find that inspired action is kind of like that thing that overrides, that can override basically anything and everything, but also like what human design says. Because let's say, I kind of have this overall intention, like wherever I go out, if I can be of service, I am open and willing to be of service. So many times I will get a nudge, a ping, an intuitive hit, whatever you want to call it, whatever it feels like to you, to start a conversation with someone. And I've learned to trust it. I don't really question it anymore. And I will start the conversation, and then, gradually the person will open up to me, and then I'll be able to offer some insight. Now, in these situations, I do find that the invitation is shorter lived, and I can really feel when it's come complete. And many times, even though I know like the full plan to help that person, it's not what they need. All they need is maybe like a step or two, and that's all that God needs me to contribute to the situation. Okay? So I've learned to trust that, and I no longer walk away feeling like, man, I could have helped them so much more. No, I helped them to the degree that they were ready to be helped. The rest is in their hands and God's hands. Okay, so again, we're not operating like completely like going rogue. It's instances in which I have felt that pull, that intuitive knowing, that intuitive feeling to initiate. Again, divine guidance, inspired action. I feel like it's a little bit different. There's a different feeling, okay? One of the things that I've been doing recently, because again, I'm starting this new business, not quite sure what it's going to evolve into, but I kind of wanted to see, okay, how exactly do my gifts play out? Because like I've read about them, I can kind of see them playing out in the past, but like how can I use these gifts now to kind of like create a second stream of income for myself? So what I started doing on Instagram, the people that I followed, the people that I had worked a little bit with when I was doing my human design certification, I did some practice readings, and some people actually started following me. So there's one person who like posted something on their stories where they were having like a little bit of health issues. So I replied to that story and I said, hey, I'm sorry you're not feeling well. Would you be open to me looking at your chart and maybe giving you a couple of tips, a couple of insights as to what you can do to help you regain more of that life force, or more of that energy, more of your health? And they were like, yeah, absolutely. So again, I asked for the invitation, but take note of like what's the underlying energy, because I easily could have done that, and I have done it in the past where I'm like, let me help you, I know how to help you, there was a neediness energy, and those were things that didn't get replies, or they just got flat out no's, okay? But this time when I approached the situation with a very light touch, with like, let me just ask. If they're not open, that's okay. There was a sense of detachment. There was nothing to prove. I just really wanted to help, and I also kind of like, even though I wasn't charging, these were all like complimentary sessions. The energetic exchange for me was information. It was data. So I find like in the beginning, like when I'm beginning this new project, I want data, I want information. So I have been able to reach out to people and ask for an invitation and get really good results, again, because I don't have beliefs around like they're going to say no. Like, no, I want to help. They feel that I want to help, and I do help, and then it comes to a close, okay? And I'm okay with it coming to a close because, again, I got my information and I'm able to refine my process, okay? So I don't know if it's like the individual circuitry, or if it's just me like believing that I don't necessarily have to initiate. I just have to keep an eye out for like what's the underlying energy, and if there's resistance, okay, back off. The resistance is there to protect your energy, not make it mean anything. But I really want to say, like, if I'm capable of like doing this, so can anyone. I'm not saying don't do it from a manipulative. I don't do it with the intention to be manipulative. Again, I'm doing it very intentionally. I want to learn. I want to see, okay, what services can I provide? So you can ask for an invitation. Just kind of tune in to that the invitation might last a shorter time, and that's okay. What's your intention behind asking for the invitation? Okay. Now, another thing that I've kind of felt like people misinterpret waiting for the invitation is like, I get the idea that people are taking that to mean, like, for example, if I get hungry, I'm waiting for someone to invite me to eat. No, my love. If you get hungry, you get up and you make yourself food, or you go get yourself food, okay? Again, remember, 4 key areas are the ones where we really want to look for an invitation. Otherwise, if it's just things that we want to do, desires that we have, nudges that we have, things we want to explore, experiences that we want to have, we have a lot of freedom, we have a lot of say, we can take action, okay? If I'm hungry, I'm going to go feed myself. Now, let's say I want to go to lunch, but I don't want to eat by myself. So, what do? I either set an intention. I would really like to have someone join me for lunch today. Maybe someone will call me. What's the inspired action? Like, will someone call you? It's totally possible. Hey, would you like to have lunch with me? Oh, I was just thinking, I wanted to have lunch with someone. Absolutely, I would love to go to lunch with you. Another thing I could do is I could ask someone. Maybe I'll get a no. But that's okay, I'll call somebody else. You know, maybe I'll get to the place where I want to eat and I realize a friend is there and we will end up having lunch together, okay? I want to encourage you to like think outside of the box. And those are kind of like some manifestation skills really come into use. And it's a lot funner. It doesn't feel like you're just waiting, especially when you're learning to really like navigate, like waiting for the invitation. Another kind of like visual I get sometimes of how people take the invitation is like, if there's a fire or if there's an emergency, I'm not going to sit around and wait for someone to invite me to call for help or to put out the fire. I'm going to take initiative and I'm going to call emergency services. Like in that case, you don't need an invitation, okay? Call for help. But like some people, that's how they take the invitation. And if you're one of those, just know, again, don't be so afraid of getting it wrong. Okay, many times we can be afraid of getting something wrong because we're afraid of punishment, we're afraid of this, we're afraid of failure, whatever. It's an experiment. Let's make it fun. The more fun we make it, you know, the easier it can be, and it's just going to feel so much better than taking it so seriously. Okay, nobody's really grading us on this human design experiment. What else did I want to mention about the invitation? Hold on, because I had a lot I wanted to say. Asking for the invitation. Okay. Before the book, I mentioned that just because we receive an invitation doesn't mean we have to accept it. Okay. Well, let's say that I receive an invitation from a friend who wants to hang out, and they want to go hiking, and it's a day where I'm feeling like I really don't want to go. Like I don't feel like I have the energy to go hiking, and I could either say no, thank you, not this time, or I could say to my friend, you know what, I'm feeling really tired today and I would love to go hiking, but my body feels like it's saying no, so I'm not available to go hiking. I would love to spend time with you, and I'm available. Like I feel up to watching a movie at home, or maybe going to the movies. Does that sound like something you want to do? And they could say, yeah, I could do a movie, or they could be, you know what, I really wanted to go hiking, so okay, maybe we can do something next time. Maybe they will again agree to the new terms that you have expressed to them. So don't close yourself off to like an invitation that either has to be yes or no. Like you can negotiate a little bit, and if it ends up like it's not working, trust it. It's going to leave that space open and available for a better, more aligned invitation where all the parties are going to benefit more. Okay. Another thing that I've really heard, or that I've heard people, projectors, say is that they do not like to respond. All they do is wait for the invitation, because responding belongs to generators and mani-gens. Now I kind of wish that when they say this, they really like put this piece of information in here, because I had to ask someone who's been like into human design a little bit more longer and a little bit more like into it than I am. Like, wait, I don't understand this concept. Could you explain it to me? Because like what I asked was like, okay, I'm hearing that projectors don't respond, but kind of like what comes to mind is like, if I get an invitation to like, let's say a wedding, there is an RSVP, which essentially means please reply, like let me know if you're coming or not. So it's not just about receiving the invitation, like you also got to let the person know whether or not you're responding, whether or not you're attending, right? And that requires a reply, a response. So I can't quite get behind the idea that as a projector I don't respond. And then there's this other concept of like it's a response, but it's not a response that's coming from the sacral center. And then there's this concept of like human design has its own language, okay? Responding in human design is slightly different from like the dictionary term of responding. When we're talking human design language, responding refers more to the sacral center, a response that comes from the sacral center. I'm like, okay, but this is how I see it. Like, I can't quite get behind that. Like, I don't have a sacral response in the sense, this is how it works in my brain, and I understand if this isn't how it works in traditional human design, I'm just, trying to make sense of this, is that I still have a sacral center. I'm like, if you could show me in my chart and where like the sacral center is, it's not there, it's missing, because I am a projector and the sacral center, I don't have one. That's when I could fully get behind where like I don't respond. But I do respond. And I want to say that in some cases, very itty bitty tiny cases, I could feel a gut response even though that's not my authority. Okay? Because the other thing that comes to mind is like, it's your chart is just kind of like your blueprint, right? But there's these other factors to consider. There's like transits, there's the people you're interacting with. Those are going to cause certain aspects of your chart to get activated, and things like that. So I kind of get a little bit like, I have issues when people say like you don't respond. Like, okay, maybe I don't respond from my sacral center. I can kind of get behind that, but I still have one. So you can't tell me that I don't respond, because like I do respond to the invitation. So it's kind of like this whole like, yeah, but, and I don't feel like either of us are wrong. We're just looking at it from a different perspective. Okay, so there's human design language, and there's language, and then if you speak more than one language, that's where it could get a little bit more tricky and complex, because what I realize is the same words have different meaning for different people. So many times I have to be like, okay, hold up, what does this word mean to you? Does it have a positive connotation? Does it have a negative connotation? Because this is how I'm seeing it. And again, it's not that we're necessarily, either one of us is wrong, we're just looking at it differently. So I tend to have a little bit of an issue with like believing that I don't initiate or that I don't respond, because the way I see my type, and this isn't how traditional human design teaches it, is I see my type as the leading energy in my life. So the leading energy in my life is to wait for the invitation. However, there are subtle nuances to my chart, to my gene key profile, that I can leverage, and I'm not necessarily waiting for the invitation all the time. Certain situations I can initiate, I can respond. Doesn't mean I have to, but again, I think I'm quite good at being able to read the situation, and I pause, ask for guidance, and then I feel into like, what does the situation call for in this particular moment? Doesn't mean that I'm automatically now operating in this new way forever. I'm just saying, in this particular moment, what needs to happen, what can happen, what do I need to do to complete the goal, to get to the goal. So that's the way I see it, because for example, when I look at my chart, I realize that like from an unconscious perspective, I'm a self-projected projector, and from a conscious perspective, I am a mental projector. So many times, a lot of the information I read about mental projectors really resonated with me. But, from a traditional human design perspective, they're like, no, it shouldn't resonate. So they're kind of like telling me, but I'm like, this is what I'm feeling. How can you tell me that, this doesn't feel true to me if you're not feeling what I feel? So I tend to rely a little bit more on my intuition, like my inner knowing, and I get really good results. And again, I think it's very easy for me to do this. I think anyone can do it. It might just take them a little bit of practice, and it's about asking the right questions, especially when you're asking for guidance, where it can feel a lot more liberating of like, oh, I don't always have to wait for an invitation. So again, it depends on how you look at it. You either really get behind waiting for the invitation, you understand the silence component, you understand how your aura just sucks things in, and then you use your authority to decide whether or not the invitation is correct for you. But I feel like sometimes situations are going to call for something a little bit different. Another thing that comes to mind, or like another example, is like, for example, if you're in the hospital, or if you have a loved one that's in a hospital, like let's say earlier this year, my dad was admitted into the ICU, and like I want to say I did a lot of initiating, I did a lot of responding, I did a lot of like, I wasn't just waiting around, you know. I asked questions many times, like advocating for your loved one, especially with like some doctors that can be a little bit more resistant or not as open. You know, everybody's different, so there are some doctors, some nurses that are not as great as others. Their quality of care, their bedside manner isn't as great as others, and these are situations where you're really going to have to step into your power, and you're not just going to sit around and wait as a projector, okay? I feel like sometimes in those situations you're going to need to be a little bit more assertive and like, no, you're not the right doctor, get me someone else, okay? So I would invite you to not take that waiting for the invitation to an extreme. Again, remember 4 key areas. Focus on being really big on the invitation on those big areas, and then with the smaller stuff, learn to play and see what happens when, you know, you initiate or you respond. But again, learn to use questions and watch the underlying energy, because as projectors, people are probably going to feel our intensity a little bit more, even though they don't realize it. And again, I don't say this to encourage you to, like, you know, go rogue all the time. Just saying some situations are going to call for us doing things a little bit differently, okay? And again, sometimes I get the idea, like I had someone leave a comment on one of the videos saying that they wanted a coach, but they hadn't received an invitation from a coach to work with them. And I'm like, my love, it doesn't necessarily work that way. Like, if you feel called to working with someone, you can, you know, ask questions and then use your authority to decide whether or not they're a right fit for you. But you have a lot more say, you have a lot of freedom in a lot of things where the invitation doesn't necessarily apply, okay? Start introducing the concept and start saying what flows really well, what worked for you, what didn't, tweak it. But like, let's say there are services. If a pipe breaks in my house, I'm not going to sit around and wait for someone to come and invite me to have them fix it. No, like, I will call someone, like they're offering a service in that sense, you know, they're like being registered somewhere. It's kind of like an open invitation for business. It's different. We want to focus more on the invitation when there's like a personal exchange of energy, especially when it's like our energetic output, which has to do with like physical energy, mental energy, ideas. Money, I want to say, is kind of like also a big one, but like when you're learning or when you're wanting to invest in a coach, many times right now the coaching industry, because it's not regulated, a lot of people can say a lot of things. And again, this concept of like the same word can mean different things to different people. For example, when I was doing my human design certification, one of the things that really drew me about the person is that they advertise themselves as someone who is really high on integrity. So I trusted that, and once I was inside the program, I felt like a lot of things were out of integrity. And I realized that their level of integrity wasn't quite as high as my level of integrity, and I actually ended up having all sorts of issues in that container. But also, like, I realized how, for me, like, even though it felt like the right move, this is where I really have been learning to bring in my taste cognition, where I find that even though, like, as a self-projected projector, I can make decisions quite quickly, I find that when it's working with someone else, being in a container, in somebody else's container, I find that it works much better if I kind of pause a little bit and have a taste, have a sample of their work, whether it's through like following them on Instagram or watching a couple of their free master classes or purchasing a lower ticket offer, that can really help me gauge whether or not they're a right fit for me. So even though I can make decisions quite quickly, sometimes I need to pause a little bit to get a taste. But again, this mostly applies for like, I find coaching containers, also, what was another one I was going to mention? Coaching containers. Oh, romantic relationships. That's another one. Where I find like I need a little bit more information from the person. I need to take my time a little bit more in order to feel into the situation, because again, it's a bigger commitment, and with a lot of these coaching containers, it's a higher ticket offer, right? There's a little bit more of an investment involved. It's a bigger investment. So these are just some things to tune into, because again, there are these subtle nuances in certain gates and how conditioning, like how we grew up, that can place a little bit more emphasis on certain aspects of your chart. And I find that it takes like a very intuitive human design reader, and like the way I like to work is I like to look at the person first, and I like the person to tell me, okay, what are you going through, what are you feeling, what's the challenge that you're experiencing right now, and how can we use your chart to see what you can leverage in this particular situation to really help you shift into a higher frequency, into a better experience. Where I feel like many people, what they do is like they interpret your chart based on the piece of paper. And I'm not saying that's not possible, but like when I've had people do that, like a lot of the things they say don't resonate. And I want to say that there are aspects of that, but again, like I like looking at the person first and then using your chart to support them. What else did I want to say? I guess I'll plug this in as well here. It has to do with that concept of like learning to step into my power, because before, again, I created this pattern of outsourcing my power. I didn't feel confident in me being able to stick up for myself, and that's something that I've been really learning to do. Not in an aggressive way, just from a very grounded, like, knowing my worth, feeling my worth, and advocating for myself. I bring this because, like, sometimes with invitations, if we're in an energy, or we've been conditioned to, like, be very humble and not be outspoken and not, share certain things because it doesn't feel safe, because we're not supposed to, because we're meant to be seen, not heard, things like that, we can really be around people that aren't healthy for us, where they take advantage, where, they're getting the better end of things, and we're kind of like feeling drained, not feeling seen, not feeling recognized. Just know that things can shift very quickly, okay? That doesn't have to be your experience. Things can shift very quickly. I'm not a believer that things have to take a long time. Yes, be patient, but also don't let that patience make things drag out longer than they need to. Okay, there's one more thing I do want to add about the invitation. I know I said that many times, like, I feel as a projector, like, I do respond to the invitation. I do provide, like, a clear yes or no to the invitation. I do want to put this out there because this kind of came to me as I was getting ready to go out. But there will be some times where no answer, no reply will be the move, okay? And this kind of came to mind because, like, I was in a relationship once where the person was a narcissist, and in that situation, I felt like no response, like no recognition whatsoever was the power move, was the safe move, was the wise move. Other ways this has played out, like if I get a certain DM on Instagram where it's someone like soliciting work or service, it feels icky to me. So I don't respond. I don't allow that message in. So again, learn to feel into the situation. And as a projector, you're going to feel it because that's one of our gifts. Like, we can feel many times the intention behind certain invitations. So I don't want you to get the idea that you're always going to need to respond or reply, or whatever word you want to use, to an invitation. Sometimes, again, not replying, not giving an answer is going to feel like the power move. And when I say power move, it feels very grounded. It feels very like owning your gifts and recognizing yourself and setting a higher standard. So it's my invitation to really like learn to play with the invitation, learn to feel into it, experiment with smaller things, and start gathering data, start collecting information, so for when the bigger invitations come, you have already begun the process of learning to navigate invitations. Just one of the other main takeaways is learn to trust yourself, okay? And you've got this. You can do this. And let's not make it harder than it needs to be. Right, needs? Okay, I can't think of anything else, so I'm going to just assume, I'm going to trust that information is complete for now. If there's something I do want to add, well, then we can do a part 2 to this video. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, feel free to drop them down below, and I can, answer those for you. If you would like to follow along on my journey, find ways of working with me, you can find me on Instagram. My handle is at Jeannie Salcedo. You can also find more information on my website. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Alright, turn around and look, y'all. Meats! Meats! Meatball! Meatball! Hi, Bubs! You're so cute! Trying to get settled. I washed my hair yesterday, so I've got fresh hair. I also decided to give my bangs a trim, and let me tell y'all, they're a little extra bouncy today, so let me see if they will stay in place. Oh my goodness. I was just thinking, like, I've always been able to keep my bangs on point. Oh, what is on my phone? I get Farrah Fawcett vibes. Look at that sun. Look at that sun coming in. Yes. Okay. I think this will do. Now that has been taken care of, let's get started. I want to make sure I cover everything because I don't want to have to film this again. This is going to be a pretty lengthy video. We're over an hour.